The TechWave office buzzed with activity on a typical Monday morning. Employees shuffled into the cafeteria, grabbing coffee and breakfast before starting their workday. Among them was Luke Anderson, the company's arrogant manager, known for his sharp tongue and questionable humor. As Henry Johnson, the building's janitor, diligently wiped down tables and swept the floor, Luke spotted an opportunity for what he considered entertainment. With a smirk, he approached Henry, his voice loud enough to draw attention from nearby co-workers. "Hey, Henry! I see you're still mastering the art of pushing a broom. Maybe if you work hard enough, you'll get promoted to mop duty." Luke's comment elicited chuckles from a few colleagues who always seemed eager to laugh at his jokes, regardless of their appropriateness. Henry, a man in his late 50s with graying hair and weathered hands, didn't respond. He continued his work, maintaining a stoic expression that betrayed no hint of the hurt or anger he might have felt. This wasn't the first time Luke had targeted him with racist remarks, and Henry knew it wouldn't be the last. As Luke continued his tirade, more employees entered the cafeteria. Some looked uncomfortable, averting their eyes or hurrying past. Others, emboldened by Luke's behavior, joined in with their own snide comments. "I bet Henry here doesn't even know how to use a computer." "Stick to what you know, old man," another employee chimed in, earning an approving nod from Luke. Henry's movements remained steady and purposeful. He'd faced discrimination before and had learned that engaging often made things worse. Instead, he focused on his job, his eyes reflecting a quiet determination that went unnoticed by his tormentors. Meanwhile, in a sleek conference room on the top floor, Marcus Johnson, TechWave's CEO, was presenting his vision for a more inclusive company culture to the board of directors. At 35, Marcus was younger than most in his position, but his innovative ideas and leadership skills had quickly propelled him to the top. "Gentlemen, ladies, I believe it's time for TechWave to take a stand on diversity and inclusion," Marcus began, his voice firm and passionate. "Our workforce should reflect the world we live in. By embracing different perspectives, we can drive innovation and create products that truly serve all communities." He clicked through his presentation, showcasing statistics and potential initiatives. "I propose we implement unconscious bias training, revamp our hiring practices to attract diverse candidates, and create employee resource groups to foster a sense of belonging for all our staff." As Marcus paused to gauge the room's reaction, Luke's voice cut through the silence. "With all due respect, Mr. Johnson, don't you think we should be focusing on more important things? Like, I don't know, actually making money?" Luke's interruption was met with mixed reactions. Some board members nodded in agreement while others frowned at the blatant disrespect. Marcus, taken aback by the interruption, composed himself quickly. "Luke, I appreciate your concern for our bottom line. However, numerous studies have shown that diverse companies outperform their less diverse counterparts. This isn't just about doing the right thing, it's about positioning TechWave for long-term success." Undeterred, Luke pressed on. "That all sounds nice on paper, but we're not a charity. We're here to develop cutting-edge technology, not hold hands and sing Kumbaya." The tension in the room was palpable. Marcus, realizing that he was facing more resistance than anticipated, decided to change tactics. "I hear your concerns, Luke. Let's table this discussion for now and reconvene after we've had a chance to review the data more thoroughly. I'm confident that once we examine the potential benefits, we'll all be on the same page." As the meeting adjourned, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that implementing his vision would be more challenging than he'd initially thought. He watched as Luke left the room, surrounded by a group of like-minded executives, all of them dismissing the importance of inclusion with casual waves of their hands. Marcus remained in the conference room, gathering his thoughts. He knew that changing the company culture wouldn't happen overnight, but he was determined to make it happen. Little did he know that the very man who could help him achieve this goal was currently cleaning up the mess left behind by those who underestimated him. As the day progressed, Marcus found himself distracted by the interaction he had witnessed in the conference room. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about the company culture, but he couldn't quite put his finger on it. Deciding to take a walk to clear his head, he made his way down to the lower floors of the TechWave building. As he rounded a corner, he came across a scene that made him pause. Luke was standing near the water cooler, surrounded by a group of employees. At first, Marcus thought it was just a casual gathering, but as he got closer, he overheard Luke's voice, loud and mocking. "Did you see old Henry fumbling with the copy machine earlier? I swear it's like watching a caveman discover fire." Luke's laughter echoed through the hallway, joined by a few nervous chuckles from his audience. Marcus frowned, feeling a knot form in his stomach. He watched as Henry, who was nearby replacing trash bags, kept his head down and continued working. The janitor's face remained impassive, but Marcus could see the tension in his shoulders. For a moment, Marcus considered intervening, but uncertainty held him back. As the CEO, he knew his actions carried weight, and he didn't want to make a scene without fully understanding the situation. Still, the discomfort lingered as he made his way back to his office, resolving to keep a closer eye on the interactions within the company. Later that evening, Henry Johnson returned to his modest home in a working-class neighborhood. Despite the day's challenges, his demeanor softened as he entered the warm, inviting space filled with family photos and the aroma of home-cooked meals. "Dad, you're home," Marcus called out from the kitchen where he was preparing dinner. The younger Johnson had insisted on coming over to cook for his father, a routine they had established to ensure they stayed connected despite their busy lives. As they sat down to eat, Henry couldn't help but beam with pride at his son. "So, how's life at the top treating you, Mr. CEO?" he asked, a hint of playfulness in his voice. Marcus chuckled, but his expression quickly turned serious. "It's challenging, Dad. I'm trying to implement some changes, make TechWave more inclusive, you know. But I'm facing some resistance." Henry nodded thoughtfully, his years of experience evident in his wise gaze. "Change is never easy, son. Especially when it comes to changing people's hearts and minds, but it's necessary." "I just wish I knew how to go about it," Marcus sighed, pushing his food around his plate. "There's this manager, Luke. He's difficult. Seems to push back against every idea I have about improving company culture." Henry's eyes flickered with recognition at the name, but he kept his expression neutral. "Have you considered that sometimes the best way to change a culture is to lead by example? Show them the benefits of inclusivity rather than just telling them about it." Marcus leaned forward, intrigued. "What do you mean, Dad?" "Well," Henry began, his voice calm and measured, "in my experience, people are more likely to follow actions than words. If you want to create a respectful environment, start by treating everyone with respect yourself, from the top executives down to the—" He paused for a moment. "The janitors." Marcus nodded slowly, absorbing his father's words. "You're right, Dad. I need to be more proactive. Set the tone from the top down." As they continued their meal, the conversation shifted to lighter topics. But Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that his father's advice held more weight than he initially realized. He made a mental note to pay closer attention to the interactions at all levels of the company. The next day, during a strategy meeting, Marcus found himself face-to-face with Luke once again. As Marcus presented his ideas for a new diversity initiative, he could see Luke's skepticism written plainly across his face. "With all due respect, Mr. Johnson," Luke interrupted, his tone barely concealing his disdain. "These inclusive policies sound great in theory, but they're not practical. We need to focus on results, not feel-good programs." Marcus felt a flash of irritation, but remembered his father's words. Taking a deep breath, he responded calmly. "I understand your concern, Luke, but I believe that creating an inclusive environment will lead to better results. Diverse teams bring diverse perspectives which can drive innovation." Luke scoffed. "That's just idealistic thinking. In the real world, we need to focus on hard skills and experience, not diversity quotas." The tension in the room was palpable. Other executives shifted uncomfortably in their seats, looking between Marcus and Luke. Marcus could feel the weight of their gazes, knowing that how he handled this moment could set the tone for his entire tenure as CEO. Drawing on his resolve, Marcus spoke firmly. "Luke, I value your input, but I disagree. These aren't just feel-good programs. They're strategic initiatives backed by data. I'd be happy to share the research with you after the meeting." Luke opened his mouth to argue further, but Marcus held up a hand, silencing him. "For now, let's move on to the next item on our agenda. We can discuss this further in a one-on-one meeting later." As the meeting continued, Marcus couldn't help but feel a mix of frustration and determination. He knew that changing the company culture wouldn't be easy, especially with resistant employees like Luke, but he was more convinced than ever that it was necessary. As he left the meeting room, Marcus made a mental note to dig deeper into the company's dynamics. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was more going on beneath the surface, and he was determined to get to the bottom of it. A week after the tense strategy meeting, Marcus sat at his desk, staring at an email that had just arrived in his inbox. The subject line read, "Urgent Workplace Misconduct Report." His heart raced as he clicked to open it. The email was from an anonymous employee detailing a pattern of discriminatory behavior within the company. As Marcus read through the allegations, his stomach churned. The report specifically named Luke Anderson as the primary instigator of racist and derogatory comments, particularly targeting the janitorial staff. Marcus leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. He had suspected something was off, but the extent of the problem was worse than he had imagined. The anonymous nature of the complaint made it clear that employees feared retaliation, which only added to the severity of the situation. Determined to get to the bottom of this, Marcus decided to investigate the matter personally. He spent the next few days discreetly observing interactions around the office, paying particular attention to Luke's behavior. What he saw confirmed the email's allegations. Luke's snide comments and dismissive attitude towards the support staff, especially Henry, were impossible to ignore once Marcus knew what to look for. As he mulled over how to address the situation, Marcus realized he needed more information. He decided to speak with Henry directly, hoping to gain insight from someone who had been on the receiving end of this behavior. Marcus arranged to meet Henry after hours in a quiet corner of the building. As Henry approached, Marcus noticed the weariness in the older man's eyes, a stark contrast to the determined set of his shoulders. "Mr. Johnson," Henry began, his voice respectful but guarded. "You wanted to see me?" Marcus nodded, gesturing for Henry to take a seat. "Yes, Henry. Thank you for meeting with me. I wanted to talk to you about the work environment here at TechWave." Henry's expression remained neutral, but Marcus could see a flicker of wariness in his eyes. "What about it, sir?" Taking a deep breath, Marcus decided to be direct. "Henry, I've received reports of discriminatory behavior in the office, particularly directed at our janitorial staff. I've also observed some concerning interactions myself. I was hoping you could share your experiences with me." For a moment, Henry was silent, his gaze fixed on the floor. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet but firm. "Mr. Johnson, I've worked here for over 20 years. I've seen a lot of changes, good and bad. But lately—" He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "Lately, it's been harder to come to work." As Henry began to open up, Marcus listened intently. The janitor recounted instances of verbal abuse, exclusion from company events, and blatant disrespect from certain employees, with Luke being the ringleader of most incidents. "But why didn't you report this before?" Marcus asked, struggling to understand. Henry's smile was tinged with sadness. "Mr. Johnson, when you're in my position, sometimes staying quiet seems safer than speaking up. I've got bills to pay, a family to support. I couldn't risk losing my job." Marcus felt a pang of guilt. As CEO, he should have created an environment where every employee felt safe to speak up. "I'm sorry, Henry. This isn't acceptable and it stops now, but I need your help. How do you think we can improve things around here?" Henry straightened in his chair, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "Well, sir, if you're asking my opinion, I'd say it starts with education. Many folks here have never had to walk in someone else's shoes. Maybe if they understood our experiences, they'd think twice before making those hurtful comments." Marcus nodded, ideas already forming in his mind. What about a mentorship program or diversity workshops? Those could work, Henry agreed. But it's also about accountability. People need to know there are consequences for discriminatory behavior. As their conversation continued, Marcus found himself impressed by Henry's insights and ideas. The janitor's years of experience and unique perspective offered valuable input that Marcus realized had been overlooked for far too long. By the end of their meeting, Marcus had pages of notes and a renewed sense of purpose. He thanked Henry for his honesty and courage, assuring him that changes would be made. However, as Marcus walked back to his office, the weight of the task ahead settled on his shoulders. He knew that addressing this issue would likely meet with resistance, particularly from Luke and his supporters. The thought of confronting Luke, potentially having to fire a top-performing manager, made Marcus hesitate. What if the board disagreed with his actions? What if addressing this issue caused more problems than it solved? The potential backlash could damage the company's reputation and bottom line. Marcus sat at his desk, staring at the notes from his conversation with Henry. He knew what needed to be done, but the path forward was fraught with potential pitfalls. As he contemplated his next move, Marcus realized that this decision would define his leadership and the future of TechWave. With a deep breath, he picked up his phone. It was time to call an emergency board meeting. Whatever the consequences, Marcus was determined to create the inclusive environment he had envisioned for TechWave. The real challenge was just beginning. The next morning, Marcus arrived at the office earlier than usual. He had spent a restless night preparing for the emergency board meeting he had called. As he walked through the office, he overheard snippets of conversations that only reinforced his resolve. Employees were whispering about recent incidents, some expressing frustration, others fear. Marcus's assistant handed him a stack of papers as he entered his office. "These just came in, sir. More complaints about Mr. Anderson's behavior." Marcus nodded grimly, adding the new reports to his already substantial file. The situation was escalating faster than he had anticipated. He couldn't afford to wait any longer. At 9 a.m. sharp, Marcus entered the boardroom. The tension was palpable as the board members took their seats, their faces a mix of curiosity and concern. Marcus took a deep breath and began. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice. I've called this meeting to address a serious issue within our company." He paused, making eye contact with each board member. "We have a systemic problem with discrimination and harassment, particularly targeting our support staff." A murmur rippled through the room. Marcus continued, laying out the evidence he had gathered, including anonymous complaints, his own observations, and the conversation with Henry. As he spoke, he could see the shock and discomfort on some faces, while others remained frustratingly impassive. "This behavior goes against everything TechWave stands for," Marcus declared. "It's not just morally wrong, it's bad for business. We're losing talented employees, damaging our reputation, and creating a toxic work environment that stifles innovation." One of the board members, an older man named Richard, spoke up. "While this is concerning, Marcus, are you sure it's as widespread as you're suggesting? Luke Anderson is one of our top-performing managers. His team consistently delivers results." Marcus had anticipated this response. "Results achieved through fear and intimidation are not sustainable, Richard. Moreover, we have no idea how much talent we've lost or failed to attract because of this culture." Another board member, Sarah, chimed in. "What do you propose we do, Marcus?" Marcus outlined his plan: mandatory diversity and inclusion training for all employees, a revamp of the HR reporting system to ensure anonymity and protection for whistleblowers, and immediate disciplinary action for any confirmed cases of discrimination or harassment. "And what about Luke Anderson?" Richard asked, his tone challenging. Marcus met his gaze steadily. Given the severity and consistency of the complaints against him, I believe we have no choice but to terminate his employment. The room erupted in a flurry of arguments. Some board members supported Marcus's decision, while others argued that firing Luke would be too drastic. The debate raged on for nearly an hour before Marcus finally called for a vote. By a narrow margin, the board approved Marcus's plan, including Luke's termination. As the meeting adjourned, Marcus felt a mix of relief and apprehension. He knew the hardest part was yet to come. Marcus instructed HR to prepare the necessary paperwork and asked security to be on standby. Then he called Luke into his office. Luke swaggered in, his usual smirk in place. "What's up, boss? Another diversity meeting?" Marcus gestured for Luke to sit. "Luke, I've called you here to discuss some serious allegations that have been made against you." Luke's smirk faltered. "Allegations? What are you talking about? We've received multiple complaints about your behavior, specifically regarding discriminatory and harassing comments towards our support staff." Marcus's voice was firm, leaving no room for argument. Luke's face reddened. "This is ridiculous! I'm one of your top performers. Are you really going to listen to a bunch of oversensitive janitors?" Marcus felt a flash of anger at Luke's dismissive tone. "This isn't about sensitivity, Luke. It's about respect, professionalism, and creating a work environment where everyone can thrive." As Marcus continued to lay out the evidence against him, Luke's demeanor shifted from defensive to aggressive. "You can't do this to me. I'll sue for wrongful termination." "Luke," Marcus said, his voice steel, "your behavior has been documented extensively. You're being terminated for cause, effective immediately. Security will escort you to collect your belongings." Luke stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "You'll regret this, Johnson. You're ruining this company with your bleeding heart policies." As security led a fuming Luke away, Marcus slumped in his chair, the weight of the confrontation hitting him. He knew this was only the beginning. The company would be in turmoil for a while, and there would likely be pushback from Luke's allies. But as he looked out his office window and saw Henry diligently working, a small smile crossed his face. For the first time since becoming CEO, Marcus felt he was truly living up to his father's example. He had taken a stand for what was right, regardless of the consequences. Marcus picked up his phone and dialed Henry's extension. It was time to start building the inclusive culture he had envisioned for TechWave. The road ahead would be challenging, but Marcus was ready to face it head-on. The news of Luke's termination spread through TechWave like wildfire. By the end of the day, the office was abuzz with speculation and whispered conversations. Marcus knew he needed to address the situation head-on before rumors and misinformation could take root. Early the next morning, Marcus called an all-hands meeting. As employees filed into the large conference room, he could feel the tension and uncertainty in the air. Once everyone was seated, Marcus took a deep breath and began. "I know many of you have questions about recent events," he started, his voice steady and clear. "I want to be transparent with you all. Yesterday, we terminated Luke Anderson's employment due to multiple substantiated reports of discriminatory behavior and harassment." A collective gasp rippled through the room. Marcus continued, outlining the company's new zero-tolerance policy for discrimination and the steps they would be taking to create a more inclusive environment. As he spoke, he could see a mix of reactions on the faces before him: relief, skepticism, and in some cases, barely concealed resentment. "Change isn't easy," Marcus acknowledged, "but it's necessary. TechWave is committed to being a place where everyone, regardless of their position or background, is treated with respect and dignity." As the meeting concluded, Marcus announced one final change that took everyone by surprise. Effective immediately, Henry Johnson will be joining our leadership team as our new Director of Workplace Culture and Inclusion. The room fell silent for a moment before erupting into murmurs of confusion and disbelief. Henry, who had been standing quietly at the back of the room, looked as shocked as everyone else. Marcus gestured for Henry to join him at the front. As Henry made his way through the crowd, Marcus could see the mix of emotions playing across the older man's face: surprise, uncertainty, and a glimmer of pride. Henry has been with TechWave for over 2 decades, Marcus explained. His experience, insight, and unwavering commitment to respect and dignity make him the perfect person to lead us in this new direction. As the meeting dispersed, Marcus could hear the buzz of conversation. Not everyone was happy with the changes, but he knew it was a necessary first step. Over the next few weeks, Henry threw himself into his new role with a passion that surprised even Marcus. Despite initial hesitation and skepticism from some employees, Henry's genuine warmth and wisdom began to win people over. Henry's first initiative was to organize a series of listening sessions where employees from all levels of the company could share their experiences and ideas for improvement. These sessions revealed issues that had long been simmering beneath the surface: microaggressions, unconscious biases, and systemic inequalities that had gone unaddressed for years. Armed with this information, Henry worked closely with HR to develop new training programs and policies. He was a constant presence in the office, always ready with a kind word or a moment of mentorship for anyone who needed it. One afternoon, about a month into Henry's new role, Marcus stopped by his office. He found Henry poring over a stack of employee feedback forms, his brow furrowed in concentration. "How's it going, Henry?" Marcus asked, taking a seat across from him. Henry looked up, a tired but satisfied smile on his face. "It's challenging work, Mr. Johnson, but rewarding. I never thought I'd be in this position, but I'm grateful for the opportunity to make a difference." Marcus nodded, feeling a surge of pride. "You're doing an amazing job, Henry. I've already noticed a change in the office atmosphere." Henry's smile widened. "I have too. Just yesterday, I overheard some of the younger engineers inviting the cleaning staff to join them for lunch. It might seem small, but it's progress." As they continued to chat, Henry shared his plans for the coming months: mentorship programs, diversity recruitment initiatives, and a complete overhaul of the company's onboarding process to emphasize inclusivity from day one. "You know," Henry said, leaning back in his chair, "when you first offered me this position, I was terrified. I thought people would resent me, that they'd see me as just a token hire." Marcus listened intently as Henry continued. "But then I realized, this isn't about me. It's about creating a better workplace for everyone. And if my experiences can help do that, well, then I have a responsibility to try." As Marcus left Henry's office, he felt a renewed sense of optimism. The road ahead was still long, and there would undoubtedly be more challenges to face. But seeing Henry in his element, using his years of hard-earned wisdom to shape the company's future, Marcus knew they were on the right path. Later that day, as Marcus walked through the office, he noticed small but significant changes. Employees from different departments were mingling more freely. The cleaning staff were engaged in friendly conversation with executives. There was a lightness in the air that hadn't been there before. TechWave was transforming, one small interaction at a time. And at the heart of it all was Henry Johnson, the former janitor turned cultural leader, showing everyone the power of respect, empathy, and second chances. As weeks turned into months, the changes at TechWave began to take root. Under Henry's guidance, the company launched a series of initiatives aimed at fostering a more inclusive and diverse workplace. One of the most impactful was a mentorship program that paired senior employees with junior staff from underrepresented groups. Henry himself took an active role in this program, mentoring several young employees from diverse backgrounds. His office became a hub of activity, with a constant stream of people seeking his advice and guidance. One day, as Henry was wrapping up a mentoring session with a young software engineer named Aisha, he noticed a commotion in the hallway. Curious, he stepped out to investigate and found a group of employees gathered around a notice board. "What's going on?" Henry asked, approaching the group. One of the employees, a marketing specialist named Tom, turned to Henry with an excited grin. "We've just been featured in Tech Today magazine. They're calling TechWave a pioneer in workplace inclusivity. Henry's eyes widened as he read the article pinned to the board. The piece highlighted TechWave's recent initiatives, praising the company's commitment to fostering a diverse and inclusive environment. It also mentioned Henry by name, describing his journey from janitor to director of workplace culture and inclusion as a testament to TechWave's commitment to recognizing talent and potential at all levels. As word of the article spread, Henry found himself at the center of attention. Employees he had never spoken to before approached him to share their own stories or express their appreciation for the changes in the company. The positive press didn't go unnoticed by Marcus either. Later that week, he called Henry into his office for a meeting. "Henry, have you seen the latest numbers?" Marcus asked, gesturing to a report on his desk. Henry shook his head and Marcus pushed the document towards him. "Our employee retention rate has improved by 15% since we implemented your programs, and applications from diverse candidates have increased by over 30%. Henry felt a surge of pride as he scanned the figures. "That's fantastic news, Mr. Johnson." Marcus nodded, a determined look in his eyes. "It is, and I think it's time we take things to the next level. How would you feel about leading a series of workshops on empathy and inclusion? Not just for our employees, but open to other companies as well." Henry's eyes widened. "You want me to teach other companies?" "Exactly," Marcus confirmed. "Your approach is making waves, Henry. I think there's a real opportunity here to influence change on a broader scale." Though initially hesitant, Henry agreed to take on the challenge. Over the next few months, he developed a curriculum that combined his personal experiences with the strategies that had proven successful at TechWave. The first workshop was held in TechWave's main conference room, with representatives from several local tech companies in attendance. Henry felt a flutter of nervousness as he stepped up to the podium. But as he began to speak, his anxiety melted away. He shared stories from his years as a janitor, the discrimination he had faced, and the small acts of kindness that had kept him going. He talked about the importance of seeing the humanity in every person, regardless of their job title or background. As the workshop progressed, Henry could see the impact his words were having. Executives who had entered the room with skeptical expressions were now nodding along, taking notes and asking thoughtful questions. By the end of the session, the room was buzzing with energy. Participants approached Henry, eager to share their own insights and ask for advice on implementing similar programs in their own companies. The success of the workshop caught the attention of the tech industry at large. Soon, Henry found himself fielding requests for interviews and invitations to speak at conferences. One evening, as Henry was preparing to leave the office, he found Marcus waiting by his door. "I just got off the phone with the CEO of Innotech," Marcus said, his voice filled with excitement. "They want to partner with us on a project to develop accessible technology for underserved communities. They specifically requested that you be involved in the planning process." Henry felt a mix of surprise and determination. "Me? But I don't know anything about developing technology." Marcus smiled. "Maybe not, but you know about people, Henry. And that's what this project needs. Your perspective is invaluable." As they discussed the potential project, Henry couldn't help but marvel at how much his life had changed. From pushing a broom to shaping company policies and now potentially influencing the direction of technological development, it was more than he had ever dreamed possible. Yet, as he looked at Marcus, Henry saw not just his boss, but the boy he had watched grow up, now a man committed to making a difference. In that moment, Henry realized that their journey was far from over. Together, they were not just changing TechWave, but potentially the entire tech industry's approach to inclusion and diversity. With a renewed sense of purpose, Henry began to jot down ideas for the project. The future, he realized, was full of possibilities, and he was ready to embrace them all. As TechWave's reputation for inclusivity grew, so did its appeal to a diverse pool of talent. The company's recruitment team noticed a significant uptick in applications from candidates from underrepresented groups in tech. This influx of new perspectives and experiences began to shape the company in exciting ways. One morning, Henry arrived at the office to find a group of new hires waiting outside his door. Among them was Zara, a brilliant young software engineer wearing a hijab, and Alex, a non-binary developer with vibrant blue hair. Both had turned down offers from larger, more established tech giants to work at TechWave. "Mr. Johnson," Zara began, her eyes shining with enthusiasm, "we wanted to thank you personally. Your story, it's what brought us here. We believe in what TechWave is doing." Henry felt a lump form in his throat. He invited the group into his office, listening as they shared their hopes and ideas for their roles at TechWave. Their energy and passion were infectious, reminding Henry of why his work was so crucial. As the weeks passed, Henry noticed how these new employees were integrating into the company. They brought fresh perspectives to team meetings, challenged old assumptions, and introduced innovative approaches to problem solving. The diversity of thought was pushing TechWave to new heights of creativity and innovation. Henry took particular pride in mentoring these young talents. He set up regular check-ins, offering guidance on navigating the corporate world while staying true to their identities. His door was always open, and many employees, both new and old, found themselves seeking his advice on both professional and personal matters. One day, as Henry was leaving a particularly inspiring mentoring session with Alex, he bumped into Marcus in the hallway. "Henry, just the man I wanted to see," Marcus said, his face alight with excitement. "Have you heard about the Tech for All initiative?" Henry shook his head and Marcus continued. "It's a nationwide program aimed at bringing tech education to underserved communities. They're looking for corporate partners, and I think TechWave should be involved." Henry's mind raced with possibilities. "That sounds like an incredible opportunity, Mr. Johnson. What did you have in mind?" Over the next hour, Marcus and Henry brainstormed ideas. They envisioned a program where TechWave employees would volunteer to teach coding classes in local community centers, provide mentorship to aspiring tech professionals from disadvantaged backgrounds, and offer internships to promising students who might not otherwise have access to such opportunities. As they fleshed out the details, Henry couldn't help but think of his own journey. "You know, Mr. Johnson," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "if a program like this had existed when I was younger, who knows where I might have ended up?" Marcus nodded, understanding the weight of Henry's words. "That's exactly why we need to do this, Henry. We have the power to change lives, to open doors that might otherwise remain closed." With Marcus's backing, Henry threw himself into developing the TechWave Community Outreach Program. He assembled a team of enthusiastic volunteers, including many of the company's new hires who were eager to give back to their communities. The program launched with a series of weekend coding boot camps at a local community center. Henry was there for the first session, watching with pride as TechWave employees patiently guided a group of eager teenagers through their first lines of code. As the program grew, so did its impact. Stories began to circulate of young people discovering a passion for technology, of single parents finding new career paths, of communities being transformed by the power of education and opportunity. One Saturday afternoon, as Henry was observing a coding class, he noticed a young boy struggling with a particular concept. The boy's frustration was evident, reminding Henry of his own struggles when he first tried to learn about computers. Henry approached the boy, kneeling beside his chair. "What's troubling you, young man?" The boy looked up, his eyes wide with recognition. "You're Mr. Johnson. My mom told me about you. She said you used to be a janitor and now you're a big shot at TechWave." Henry chuckled, touched by the boy's words. "I wouldn't say big shot, but I did work my way up. Now let's take a look at this code together, shall we?" As Henry patiently explained the concept, he saw the light of understanding dawn in the boy's eyes. In that moment, Henry realized that his journey had come full circle. From being overlooked and underestimated, he was now in a position to lift others up, to show them possibilities they might never have imagined for themselves. Later that evening, as Henry locked up the community center, he felt a profound sense of fulfillment. TechWave was no longer just a company. It was becoming a force for change in the community, And he, Henry Johnson, once relegated to the shadows, was now helping to lead that change. As he walked to his car, Henry's phone buzzed with a message from Marcus. "Great work today, Henry. We're making a real difference." Henry smiled, his heart full of gratitude and hope for the future they were building, one line of code at a time. The impact of TechWave's initiatives began to resonate beyond the company walls. Industry publications took notice, and soon TechWave found itself nominated for the prestigious Innovation in Workplace Inclusion Award, a highly coveted recognition in the tech world. On the day of the award ceremony, the anticipation at TechWave was palpable. Marcus and Henry, along with a small delegation of employees, attended the event, representing the company's commitment to diversity and inclusion. As they sat in the grand ballroom surrounded by tech industry luminaries, Henry couldn't help but feel a sense of surrealism. Just a year ago, he had been mopping these same floors during after-hours corporate events. Now he was a guest, a nominee, a leader in his field. The ceremony progressed, with various awards being presented. Finally, the moment arrived for the Innovation in Workplace Inclusion category. As the nominees were announced, Henry felt Marcus's hand on his shoulder, a gesture of solidarity and shared hope. "And the winner is..." The presenter paused for dramatic effect. "TechWave, for their groundbreaking approach to fostering inclusivity and diversity in the tech industry." The TechWave table erupted in cheers. Henry felt a rush of emotions as Marcus urged him to the stage. As he stood at the podium, the bright lights illuminating his face, Henry took a deep breath and began to speak. "Thank you for this honor," he started, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "A year ago, I was a janitor at TechWave, invisible to most, just trying to make ends meet. Today, I stand before you as the Director of Workplace Culture and Inclusion, proof that when companies truly embrace diversity, amazing things can happen." Henry went on to speak about the importance of recognizing potential in every individual, regardless of their background or current position. He talked about the power of second chances and the transformative impact of creating truly inclusive workplaces. As he concluded his speech, Henry looked out at the audience and said, "This award isn't just for TechWave. It's for every person who's ever felt overlooked or underestimated. It's a reminder that with the right opportunities and support, we can all rise above our circumstances and make meaningful contributions." The applause was thunderous. As Henry returned to his seat, he saw tears in the eyes of his colleagues. Marcus embraced him, whispering, "You did it, Henry. You showed them all what real leadership looks like." The next day, back at TechWave, the office was buzzing with excitement. The award took pride of place in the lobby, a tangible symbol of the company's commitment to inclusion. Employees from all departments stopped by to admire it, many taking selfies to share on social media. Henry's inbox was flooded with congratulatory messages, not just from within TechWave, but from industry leaders, aspiring tech professionals, and even a few of his former janitorial colleagues. The award had catapulted him into the spotlight as a beacon of hope for underrepresented groups in tech. As Henry was sorting through the messages, he received a call from Marcus. "Henry, I need you in the conference room. There's someone I want you to meet." Intrigued, Henry made his way to the conference room. As he entered, he saw Marcus sitting with a man he recognized from tech magazines. It was David Chen, the CEO of RiverTech, one of the largest tech companies in the world. "Henry," Marcus said, standing to make introductions. "This is David Chen. He saw your speech last night and wanted to meet you in person." David stood, extending his hand to Henry. "Mr. Johnson, your words last night were truly inspiring. I've been in this industry for decades, and I've never heard someone speak so authentically about inclusion and diversity." Henry shook David's hand, still somewhat in awe of the situation. David continued, "I'm here because I believe RiverTech can learn a lot from what you've accomplished at TechWave. Would you be open to consulting with us on implementing similar programs?" The conversation that followed was one Henry could never have imagined having a year ago. They discussed the challenges of changing corporate culture, the importance of leadership buy-in, and the tangible benefits of a truly diverse workforce. As the meeting concluded, David turned to Marcus. "You've got something special here at TechWave. This partnership could be the beginning of a real shift in our industry." After David left, Marcus turned to Henry, his face beaming with pride. "Do you see what you've started, Henry? This isn't just about TechWave anymore. You're changing the entire tech landscape." Henry nodded, feeling the weight of the responsibility, but also the excitement of the possibilities ahead. As he walked back to his office, he passed the award in the lobby. He paused for a moment, reflecting on the journey that had brought him to this point. In that moment, Henry Johnson, former janitor turned industry leader, realized that his story was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. The real work of transforming the tech industry lay ahead, and he was ready for the challenge. As TechWave's success story continued to make waves in the industry, not everyone was celebrating. Luke Anderson, still bitter about his dismissal, had been closely following the company's rise in the media. Each new accolade, each glowing article about Henry and Marcus, only fueled his resentment. One evening, as Luke sat in a dimly lit bar nursing his third whiskey, he overheard a conversation at a nearby table. Two men in expensive suits were discussing TechWave's recent award and the potential partnership with RiverTech. "It's all a PR stunt," one of the men scoffed. "There's no way a janitor turned into some kind of diversity guru overnight. There's got to be more to the story." Luke's ears perked up. He had been looking for a way to get back at TechWave, and this might be his chance. Over the next few weeks, Luke reached out to his old contacts in the industry, carefully spreading rumors and insinuations about TechWave's sudden transformation. "I heard they're just hiring people for show," he would whisper to one person. "The real decisions are still made by the old guard," he'd confide in another. Slowly but surely, Luke's whisper campaign began to gain traction. Meanwhile, at TechWave, Henry and Marcus were unaware of the storm brewing outside their doors. They were fully focused on implementing their new initiatives and preparing for the partnership with RiverTech. It wasn't until Aisha, the young software engineer Henry had been mentoring, burst into his office one morning that they realized something was wrong. "Mr. Johnson, have you seen this?" Aisha asked, her voice trembling as she handed Henry her tablet. Henry's heart sank as he read the headline on the screen: "TechWave's diversity push, genuine change, or elaborate hoax?" The article, published on a popular tech blog, questioned the authenticity of TechWave's transformation and hinted at underlying issues within the company. Within hours, the story had been picked up by major tech publications. Social media was buzzing with speculation and debate. Some defended TechWave, citing the real changes they had observed, while others latched onto the controversy, amplifying the doubts raised in the original article. Marcus called an emergency meeting with Henry and the PR team. As they gathered in the conference room, the tension was palpable. "How did this happen?" Marcus asked, his face etched with concern. "We've been transparent about our journey from the beginning." Henry shook his head, a deep frown on his face. "I don't know, Mr. Johnson, but I have a feeling this isn't a coincidence. The timing, just as we're about to launch the partnership with RiverTech, it feels targeted." As they discussed potential responses, Henry's phone buzzed with a message. It was from Tom in marketing. "You might want to see this. It's spreading like wildfire." Attached was a link to a video. Henry's blood ran cold as he watched. It was footage from his early days as Director of Workplace Culture, clearly taken without his knowledge. In it, he appeared hesitant and unsure, stumbling over diversity terminology during a staff meeting. The video had been heavily edited, making Henry appear incompetent and out of his depth. "This is Luke's doing," Henry said quietly, looking up from his phone. "He's behind all of this." Marcus's jaw clenched. "Are you sure?" Henry nodded. "The video, the rumors, it all fits his MO. He's trying to discredit us to make it look like our entire inclusion initiative is a sham." The room fell silent as the gravity of the situation sank in. Everything they had worked for over the past year was at risk. The trust they had built, the progress they had made, it was all under threat. "What do we do?" someone finally asked. Marcus stood up, his face set with determination. "We fight back, with the truth. Henry, are you ready to tell your story, the whole story?" Henry took a deep breath. He had always been private about his past, preferring to focus on the present and future. But now, he realized, transparency was their best defense. "Yes," he said firmly, "it's time everyone knew the real story behind TechWave's transformation." As the meeting adjourned and plans were set in motion, Henry couldn't shake the feeling of déjà vu. Once again, he was facing discrimination and doubt. But this time, he wasn't alone. He had the support of Marcus, of TechWave, and of the countless individuals whose lives had been touched by their work. Walking back to his office, Henry steeled himself for the battle ahead. Luke and his allies had underestimated him once before. They were about to learn that Henry Johnson and the new TechWave were not so easily defeated. The next morning, TechWave's PR team kicked into high gear. They scheduled a press conference for later that day, giving Henry and Marcus just a few hours to prepare. As they worked on their statements, the negative press continued to mount. Social media was ablaze with hashtags like TechWave fraud and bar diversity hoax. At 2 p.m. sharp, Henry and Marcus stepped onto the makeshift stage in TechWave's lobby, facing a sea of reporters and flashing cameras. The air was thick with tension as Marcus approached the microphone. "Thank you all for coming," Marcus began, his voice steady. "We've called this press conference to address the recent allegations against TechWave. But rather than me telling you about our commitment to diversity and inclusion, I'd like you to hear from the man who has been at the heart of our transformation. Ladies and gentlemen, Henry Johnson." As Henry took the podium, he felt a moment of panic. But then he caught sight of familiar faces in the crowd, Aisha, Alex, and other employees he had mentored. Their presence gave him strength. "My name is Henry Johnson," he began, his voice growing stronger with each word. "A year ago, I was a janitor at TechWave. Today, I stand before you as the Director of Workplace Culture and Inclusion. This isn't a story of overnight success or a PR stunt. It's a story of struggle, perseverance, and the power of opportunity." Henry went on to share his journey in detail, the years of invisible labor, the discrimination he faced, and the pivotal moment when Marcus recognized his potential. He spoke about the challenges of transitioning into his new role, admitting to the mistakes and uncertainties he had faced along the way. "Yes, there's a video circulating of me stumbling over diversity terms," Henry said, addressing the elephant in the room. "That was real. I was learning, growing, just like our company was. Change isn't always smooth, but it's always worth it." As Henry continued, the mood in the room began to shift. Reporters who had arrived skeptical were now listening intently, many furiously taking notes. Henry concluded his speech by inviting any interested parties to visit TechWave, to see the changes for themselves and to speak with employees at all levels. After the press conference, Henry and Marcus retreated to Marcus's office, emotionally drained but hopeful. They had done all they could. Now they had to wait and see how the public would respond. They didn't have to wait long. By that evening, the tide of public opinion was turning. Employees from TechWave, past and present, had taken to social media to share their own stories of how the company's initiatives had impacted them. The hashtag #DaRealTechWave was trending, filled with personal anecdotes and words of support. But the most surprising turn came the next morning. Luke Anderson, perhaps sensing that his plan had backfired, attempted to do damage control. He appeared on a popular tech podcast, intending to further discredit TechWave. However, when pressed by the host, Luke's arguments fell apart. His bitterness and prejudice became apparent, and he ended up inadvertently validating everything Henry and Marcus had said. In the days that followed, the controversy transformed into a national conversation about diversity in tech. Industry leaders, inspired by TechWave's transparency, began sharing their own struggles and commitments to change. The partnership with Rivertech, far from being derailed, was solidified, with other major tech companies reaching out to collaborate on inclusion initiatives. A week after the press conference, Henry received a call from Marcus asking him to come to the lobby. As the elevator doors opened, Henry was met with a sight he'll never forget. The entire TechWave staff was gathered, erupting into applause as he stepped out. At the center stood Marcus, holding a framed article from the leading tech magazine. The headline read, "TechWave's Henry Johnson, the new face of tech inclusion." Marcus handed the frame to Henry, pulling him into a hug. "You did it, Henry. You didn't just save our company, you've started a movement." As Henry looked around at the smiling faces of all colors, ages, and backgrounds, he felt a sense of completion. The journey had been difficult, filled with obstacles and setbacks, but standing there, surrounded by his TechWave family, Henry knew it had all been worth it. Later that day, as Henry sat in his office reflecting on the whirlwind of events, he received an unexpected email. It was from a young man named Michael, Luke's son. "Mr. Johnson," the email read, "I wanted to apologize for my father's actions. Your story has inspired me to pursue a career in tech and to work towards making it a more inclusive industry. Thank you for your courage and leadership." Henry leaned back in his chair, a smile spreading across his face. This, he realized, was the true measure of success. Not awards or magazine covers, but the lives changed and the minds opened. As he began to type a reply to Michael, Henry Johnson, once an invisible janitor, now a beacon of change in the tech industry, felt a renewed sense of purpose. The work was far from over, but the future had never looked brighter.